Yeah. We're continuing in John. We're going to be in John chapter 12 this morning. But we're going to remember where we've been. Mary got exactly what she wanted. It did not come the way she thought, though. Her brother had been sick. Somehow she and her sister Martha must have known this was not an ordinary sickness. And they sent word to Jesus. He was on the other side of the Jordan. He has been there. You jump back to John chapter 10. Because after that encounter with that man born blind, where he heals him and they throw the man out of the synagogue, the Jews are causing problems for him. So Jesus withdraws to the other side of the Jordan. And word is sent to him about Lazarus. And he waits 2 more days. He does not hurry off to give Mary what she wants. Sometimes I feel like God is making me wait. Do you ever feel that? Sometimes it feels like he's not in a hurry. Sometimes I wonder if he's going to come through. I know that the minister's not supposed to say things like that, but I think that sometimes. Do you ever think that? Will he answer this prayer? There are many times that I have felt like Mary and Martha, that I have called on God, that I have sought his help. I have asked even for healing for those that I love, and I have asked for understanding from time to time, or courage, determination. I have asked to defeat some weakness, some struggle, to leave it behind, and sometimes God shows up right on time. And other times, I can understand how Martha and Mary felt. Can you understand how they felt? Maybe John tells us the story of Lazarus exactly for that reason. Sometimes it appears that God is not quick, that he does not show up when we think he should. But I want to ask you to think for a moment this morning, what if he did show up? What if he did exactly what you asked? What if he said, okay, and he gave you what you wanted? How would you say thank you? Mary found a way. John chapter 12, starting in verse 1. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived. That's a funny word, he lived. Whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It's worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. This is an amazing picture, but to really understand it, we have to go back to chapter 11. Do you remember when Jesus arrived in Bethany? He stayed outside the city. He didn't enter. He didn't go to Mary and Martha's house. Someone must have come into the house and told Martha and Mary Jesus was outside the village. And so Martha, she went and found him and told him he was late. I know the text doesn't say that. She doesn't scold him for being late. She found a much more polite way to say it, like we're supposed to be polite. If you had been here, she says. But I can hear it. Can you hear the words? If you had been here. What if I said it like this? If you had been here, if you had been here. Tone is important when reading. You have to place yourself. Mary didn't come. Remember that? Martha left, went to greet Jesus. Mary didn't. She only went when Martha told her that Jesus was asking for her. And then she went. She couldn't stay, I guess. She felt she had to go. I think Mary was profoundly disappointed. I know I would have been. This young woman had such faith in Jesus. She believed that he, in fact, is the anointed one of God. That's how she talks to him. You're the Messiah, the Son of God. She knows who he is. She believes it. And yet, I think it's okay to say she felt disappointed. Maybe, perhaps, she would even use the word abandoned, alone. He didn't come. Why didn't he come? Can you imagine that moment? Kneeling beside the bed of your brother dying, saying, why didn't he come? He was there, but he was late. He stood just outside of town, and that's where they bury the dead, outside town. He was near the tomb. Jesus came, but he was late. We see so little, don't we? We really are the man born blind. I think that's one of the reasons John puts him in the story. We don't see. You know, it really isn't your fault. You were born that way. You don't see very well, do you? That man sat by the road. He was born that way. And I was too. I was born into a physical world without some things I'm supposed to have. That's the way it feels. I don't have the eternal perspective that God created me to have. Sure, I know people die. That's what happens. People die. I have to accept it. But some part of me knows it's not natural. It's like I'm surprised every time. I'm not expecting it because somehow inside me it's not supposed to be that way. Because I believe in something I can't see. A world I don't really understand, but I believe is there. In fact, I'm not alone in that. How many people do you suppose believe in a world they cannot see? I know if you look around and you talk to people, it can feel like you're in the minority. It can feel like that, can't it? What if I told you a survey not that long ago showed about 90% of the world's population believes in something they cannot see? You're in a strong majority. The difference is the way they express it, but the world talks in a language of things they cannot see. They have a deep belief in something that they don't understand. You need to attain enlightenment. Don't block the chi. Karma and dharma. Practice meditation. Become one with the universe. There's all sorts of language that the world uses to describe something it can't see or measure, touch, or taste. We are not alone in believing that there is something more than just this. I don't know how many people are on the planet now, 6, 7 billion. Man, that's a lot of people that believe in something they cannot see. And then if we multiply it out by everybody who's ever lived. Something hardwired inside us believes in something we cannot see, but we know we were meant to. We are born blind. And all through his gospel, John has been trying to get us to see. It's a reoccurring theme over and over. He needs us to try and see what we can't see, to take hold of what we can't grab, to put hope in something we cannot measure. Jesus came into this world to try to give us sight, to help us see, to understand. For God so loved the world that he sent his one and only Son. So Mary stands in front of Jesus, drops to her knees, crying. He was late. Had he been there, all of this would have been avoided. Jesus knows our pain, and he understands it. He really does. And when he called Lazarus out of the tomb, he turned the whole world upside down. He really did. And now the text doesn't say this about Mary, but when I see her in chapter 12, I see something that I have known in myself, and it's actually something I'm very familiar with: shame. I know it doesn't say that, but when I look at the whole story, had I been so sure God had abandoned me, that he had not shown up, that he didn't care, I would have been very angry. I don't know how you would have responded. I know myself well enough after all these years to know I would have been mad. I would have stood there seeing Jesus standing late, and I would have been angry. And I know Jesus cried when Lazarus came out of the tomb. When he saw that moment, I know Jesus cried, but I'm just confessing this morning, church, had I been there watching Jesus cry at the tomb, I would have been more angry. Well, why didn't you just show up? You could have. One time, in fact, I heard a story that you didn't even go, and you just spoke the word, and he was healed. Why didn't you show up? I would have been angry. I would not have been comforted by his tears. I'm just telling you the truth. I wouldn't. I would have probably added resentment. And when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, I can only imagine how overjoyed Mary was. I mean, I know that she would have been joyful, but as she turned and saw Jesus standing there, I know what I would have felt. Shame. Why didn't I believe? That's what I would have thought. And that anger that I'd had a moment ago would have turned in on self. I know myself well enough to know that's exactly how I would have done it. And there she is. Turn the page. Kneeling at the feet of Jesus. And she pours out a year's wages. A year's wages. I don't know how much money you make in a year, but try writing that in a check. Imagine that just for a moment. It's not exactly the same, but I want you to imagine. I'm not asking you to do it. Don't get my point wrong. I just want you to picture yourself doing it. You know how much you make in a year, how much you're going to get. You with me, Gene? Write the check. That'd be tough, wouldn't it? That's what she does. She poured out a year's wages on his feet. Wow. It's an amazing way to show gratitude. I hope you've had time to think. Do you remember the question I asked you? How would you say thank you? That's what she does here in this text. I don't want you to jump ahead. Were you thinking about something God has done for you? It's too easy to jump right to the cross. I know that we're trained to do that, like we're in catechism or something, and we just got to say, Jesus to the cross. Okay, yes. I want you to think about yesterday, last week. Did you ask God for anything? Ever? Did he come through? Did you say, thank you? How did you do it? It's an important question. I think there's a reality that we need to put into practice, church. There are a lot of people, see, they believe in something they cannot see. There's a world they believe exists. They cannot see it. You understand what that means? That most of the time when you're talking to somebody you don't know, you know something they already believe. You're probably not talking to somebody who doesn't believe that there's a God or an afterlife or some power or some... You're probably not. You're probably talking to somebody who believes in something they cannot see. It may just be that what we need to start doing is having a testimony about what we have seen. I have seen some things you wouldn't believe. The reason I say that is because I don't believe them and I was there. They don't make sense. But I've seen God do some things that are amazing. And I think people need us to start putting some testimony into practice of how exactly we have seen God. Because when we just jump to the cross, and I know we need to get there, but boy, John's not in a hurry, is he? It's still a long way off. When we jump straight to the cross and we start talking about sin and forgiveness for people, I'm afraid sometimes it sounds like we're selling a timeshare. You can enjoy life someday. Because some people, they're living in a kind of hell right now. And you might have to tell them a story about yours that you were freed from. Otherwise, I don't know. They want to believe in something they cannot see, but they obviously don't know how. And it's not their fault. They were born blind. So what has God done for you? Have you seen God do amazing things? Then you need to be willing to say thank you by pouring it out. Do you know what really sticks out to me, though, in John chapter 12 in this exchange? Is Judas. What he states is obvious. This valuable perfume was just that. It was valuable and it was, well, wasted. It's just poured out on somebody's feet. It's gone. It's worth a year's wages. And soon Jesus will be arrested. He's about to be betrayed. He's going to be rejected, beaten, killed, and buried. And she pours the perfume out. The disciples are going to be locked up in a room. In just a little bit of time from this story, they're going to be locked in a room hiding because their Messiah is dead. Where's the miracle worker to bring him out? See, human perspective, my limited vision, I can get what Judas is saying, and I can understand why they're going to hide in the room because they're certain that it's just a matter of time. The Romans, the Jewish leaders, they're going to hunt them down and kill them too. Human perspective, that's exactly what I would have thought. I don't really like admitting that I understand what Judas is saying, but I get it. Because he's only thinking in the moment. Judas helps me see that. That the normal perspective that I usually have is more in line with his than it is with Mary. I know that we like this moment because we find ourselves on the right side of resurrection. So we can look back and we see the gift of Mary and this extravagant pouring out and this blessing, this amazing scene, and we look at it, but we're on this side of resurrection. Imagine being on the other. It's just crazy what she's doing. It's extravagant. And part of it is, I think, she's dealing with her shame, her guilt, her embarrassment, mixed in some sort of strange way with joy and gratitude, hope, life. And she's just doing what makes sense. So, have you been thinking about the question I asked you? Has God ever done something for you? And how would you say thank you? This one will be uncomfortable. Find some over the top, crazy, extravagant, very visible. That one hits part of my heart. I'm like, no, I like it when we talk about, in my heart, in my head, I can worship and like just... People need to see. Do you understand what I'm saying? They need to see because they're blind. And you're the witness. You're the testimony. God showed up right on time for you. It wasn't exactly the way you thought, but he came. He's blessed you. Maybe not the way that you wanted him to, but I need to ask you if you have ever received something from God, and if you're willing to look a bit foolish so that others can see. They want to, they just don't know how. And you are supposed to help them see. What would you do if Jesus opened your eyes? What if you realized right now that you were blind? You've been blind. You haven't seen. And all of a sudden, you opened your eyes, and there he stood. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Show him to me so that I can. You see him now. How would you worship him? What would you do? Now, if you're here this morning, see, this was a very insider message. I'm sorry, but it was. But if you're here this morning, if you braved coming into this strange place and these weirdo people, and you've never seen Jesus, but you want to because you know you're blind, but you know there's something else. And you've never claimed Jesus as Lord. I need you to know he's here. And we believe that in surrendering to him, participating in his death, his burial, and his resurrection through baptism, it brings forgiveness of sin, but it invites the Spirit, the very presence of God in your life, to empower you to overcome, to see, to live not just for eternity, but here, right now. We believe that. And we would invite you to come and see. And if you're a believer and you have committed your life to Jesus and accepted him as Lord, well, maybe today you need to remember where you are. You live in the presence of God. And you can say thank you. And you can offer yourself again to serve him. We would invite you to recognize where you are, to speak to God, to call out to Him, to thank Him, to do it extravagantly if you need to. Whatever your need is this morning, we hope that you would come. Let us encourage you as we stand together and sing.